Happy Friday, everybody. James Hancock here. Hope everyone has a fun weekend planned. I'm back for my semi-spoiler-free review of Deep Water from director Adrian Lyne, starring Ana de Armas and Ben Affleck. The reason I say semi-spoiler-free, I won't give away any of the plot revelations or the big twists, but the movie is now available on Hulu. The spoilers are out there. And I guess the biggest spoiler of all is that I wish I could say I loved the movie, but I didn't. I liked it. I enjoyed it. First half is more fun than the rest, but what we have here is a sexual thriller that's not quite sexy enough and not quite thrilling enough to really deserve the title sexual thriller. It's more of like a mystery that's pretty intriguing and enjoyable until it just kind of becomes clumsy and limp and disappointing by the end. And it wounds me to say any of this because if you've been following my channel for a while, you know I'm a big fan of Adrian Lyne. A couple days ago, I posted a video celebrating his entire career from his debut feature film Foxes up through his last feature film, Unfaithful. Now, he never intended to take a 20-year break between Unfaithful and Deep Water because Deep Water started going into development in 2013. And a ton of great people were involved. I mean, you have the screenwriter Sam Levinson, who has exploded into fame with his show Euphoria. You have producer Arnon Milken, who's an absolute legendary producer. You're working with source material by Patricia Highsmith, one of the most entertaining writers of the 20th century, whose books have led to countless movies over the last 50, 60, 70 years. And then, of course, you have Adrian Lyne, who basically proved the commercial viability of the sexual thriller with movies like Fatal Attraction. I'd have to double check the numbers, but I believe Fatal Attraction had a budget of about $14 million and it grossed in excess of $300 million. I mean, this is serious money. Inexpensive films with ginormous box office returns, and as somebody who misses the erotic thrillers of the 80s and 90s, I was really hoping that Deep Water would be a major return to form or a runaway sensation leading to more movies of a similar nature. But I have a feeling Deep Water is going to be pretty quickly forgotten because it's not bad. It's not a cautionary tale by any stretch of the imagination. It's just unexceptional. But there's enough good stuff about it that it's worth talking about. So let's just talk about the premise. Basically, we have a scenario where we have a very wealthy husband and a very, let's say, a flirtatious wife who is full of life, who likes living life to the hilt. She has a lot of male friends. She enjoys flaunting these relationships in public, which may or may not cross the line. A lot of Ben Affleck's friends are kind of always bewildered by the fact that his wife Elise appears to be sleeping around all over town. And there's this lingering mystery in the background where one of her former flings has gone missing. And as a kind of an ongoing joke, Ben Affleck enjoys pretending as if he killed the guy who went missing as a way of dissuading some of Ana de Armas's male friends from spending too much time around her. So it's kind of an open secret in this circle of friends that Ana de Armas and Ben Affleck have an unconventional relationship because Ana de Armas doesn't try to hide anything. I mean, she openly flirts with these guys at parties. She's always, diving into pools with them and laughing and dancing. And anyway, it's a mess. And part of the joy of this movie is watching just how angry and bitter Ben Affleck's character is at basically being a cuckold in front of everybody. And I don't know why. I was just howling with laughter, watching him just stewing with rage, watching all this unfold. But it's a weird thing where he's kind of complicit in it because Ana de Armas will be flirting with him while at the same time flirting with these other guys. And that's not entirely uncommon where some people do get turned on by watching their spouse flirt with or get it on with other people. But the big question is whether or not Ben Affleck's character is actually capable of violence because he's a loving father, he wants a wonderful marriage, he wants a wonderful family. But on the other hand, Ana de Armas' character finds this entire environment to be very, very suffocating, very conservative, very boring. And her attitude basically is that Ben Affleck's character would have committed suicide a long time ago just from outright boredom if she weren't there to spice up his life. And then around the halfway point, the movie does feature the first big major twist where one of these flings turns up dead and drowned in the middle of a party. And the big question is, who did it? Ana de Armas' character is grief-stricken and she accuses her husband then and there of doing the dirty deed. And then for the rest of the movie, we basically veer into more of like a whodunit kind of film as opposed to this sexually suggestive adult drama that was far more enjoyable for the first half or so. And for people like myself who were hoping this movie would deliver the goods when it comes to the erotic side of the erotic thriller, there's some of that there. I mean, Ana de Armas obviously is an astonishingly beautiful woman, and she's never been shy in front of the camera. I mean, if you look at her Spanish language movies, as well as a lot of her English language movies, like, like Blade Runner 2049, she's very comfortable with on-screen nudity, and there's a little bit of that in this movie, but nothing on the level of one of Adrian Lyne's previous movies like 9.5 Weeks. But in general, most of these scenes which feature the forbidden act of love, they're more suggestive than overt, like little things like giving Roadhead out of frame and then plucking a pube off the tongue after the fact, or really quick flashbacks of Ana de Armas kind of hiking her dress up while driving around with one of her young lovers. And there are a few really fun, interesting scenes where Ana de Armas is overtly flirting with a guy at a party, but at the same time reaching behind and very discreetly stroking Ben Affleck in the middle of a party. And speaking of young lovers, one of them's played by Jacob Elordi, who people will recognize from Euphoria. And I don't know if he was brought on by Sam Levinson or if Sam Levinson met him through this, because this movie kind of floated around in limbo for a good long while. Originally, it was scheduled to be released back in November of 2020, then it was delayed to August 2021, then again to January 2022, and then finally it was taken off the release schedule altogether. And from what I've read, there was a decision a couple months ago to release this online only after a lot of movies that are geared towards an adult sensibility completely, totally died at the box office. Movies like Nightmare Alley or West Side Story. And on my podcast and on this channel, I spend a lot of time complaining about how Hollywood only makes movies for kids these days. But it's not just Hollywood's fault. The audience deserves a huge share of the blame, because we show up for the movies that are geared toward the whole family, and then we ignore the movies that are geared towards an adult sensibility. And I totally get it. For parents, it's expensive to go to the movies and hire a babysitter to keep the kids at home while you go off and have a big night out. But it's important always to remember the symbiotic relationship between the content creators and the people who consume that content, and we vote with our dollars. And so the next time you go to the multiplex, you're like, wow, every single movie playing here is for a 5-year-old. We have to own up to the fact that we are a large part of the problem. But where this movie runs into problems is when it finally kind of opens the floodgates and becomes a full-blown thriller. And at that point, the movie kind of flies off the rails, and there's still some things to be enjoyed. I mean, Tracy Letts is really entertaining in this. Kristen Connolly is really good in this, and Lil Rel Howery is pretty goddamn funny as well. And there's an actor by the name of Brendan Miller, who I'd never seen before, who's absolutely hysterical as Joel Dash, who's always kind of bewildered and confused by Ben Affleck's ambiguous references to having murdered people, because Joel thinks that he's dealing with a situation where he's kind of getting involved with an open marriage, but he keeps getting mixed signals from the two halves of the relationship in question. But getting back to where this movie falls apart, without giving anything away, once the movie decides to kind of unveil who the perpetrators of these violent crimes might be, everything that made this movie kind of mysterious and interesting just collapses. And then by the end, it turns into this kind of dumb action movie almost. And I guess in theory, there are a few sequences that on the surface appear to be kind of sort of exciting. But then the movie, instead of having a climax or anything resembling an ending, it just stops. And I would say the weakest ingredient of the movie is like the last 5 minutes, where it just completely goes out with a whimper. It just disintegrates, leaving you with a really unsatisfied feeling, whereas a movie like Fatal Attraction ends with a massive bang. In the case of Deep Water, it just kind of ends with this comedy of errors. And speaking of the title Deep Water, they should have picked a different name. If you go on IMDb and even try to look up Deep Water, there's like 700 movies with the name Deep Water. Pick a different name. I don't care if you think your movie's going to stand apart. You could have called it Hot Water or Sizzling Water, or anything else that you wanted to call it. I think there's at least like 10 other movies in the last 15 years, all of which have the exact same name. So once again, I think this movie's just going to fade into obscurity. But I will say this, I applaud everybody involved for at least making the attempt. Like I said, they are at least trying to make the kind of movie that I want to see. Great material, great actors, great filmmaker, great writers. I don't know where this movie went wrong when everything on the surface appeared to be so right, but this is not a return to form for Adrian Lyne. I don't even know if it's as good as something like Unfaithful, because at least Unfaithful was arousing. It was titillating. It delivered on that front, even if I thought the thriller aspects of it were kind of limp. So like I said in my previous resume review or filmography review video of Adrian Lyne, I think his best movies remain Flashdance, Fatal Attraction, and Jacob's Ladder, and his most erotic movie is 9.5 Weeks. Deep Water, I like it more than Indecent Proposal. Maybe I like it more than Lolita, but it's definitely, of his 9 feature films, in probably the bottom third as opposed to the middle. And once again, it wounds me to say this because I want nothing but the best for Adrian Lyne, and I want him to make more movies or go back into retirement with his reputation intact. But I was really hoping that Ana de Armas would deliver a performance like Glenn Close in Fatal Attraction, where people would be talking about it for the rest of the year. And while she is sexy as hell in this and just delightful, I don't think this movie is going to hurt her career, but it's definitely not going to raise her profile or dramatically improve her career. In any case, I don't know if I'm going to say anything more because I don't really like throwing daggers at filmmakers that I like, so I almost kind of considered not even doing this review at all, but because I've been talking about this movie for the last few weeks, I felt like it would have been kind of chicken shit for me not to at least offer some opinion on the film. So I'm just going to chalk this up as a mild disappointment, but I'm moving on and pushing into my weekend and trying not to let it get me too down, because I did see a pretty fun movie last night, X, from director Ty West, so definitely check out that video as well. But sorry for kind of the haphazard, scattered, rambling nature of this review, but I would be curious to hear what other people think of this movie, so let me know down in the comments below. But if you enjoyed this review, please consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video, and hitting the notification bell to be notified for future content. But I hope everyone has an amazing weekend, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.